Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for today's webinar. My name's Grant Hostka with DJI. We're going to give it one more minute here before getting started with our panelists, so hold tight. Feel free to say hello on the chat side or pose any questions that you'll make sure to want the panelists to answer during. We'll be sending out a recording to all attendees as well after the webinar, so no worries on that end. I know it's always a common question with people wanting to share or review content after the fact. So we'll give it about a minute here and get going. Alrighty. Well, welcome everyone to today's webinar on integrating DJI Dock with some of our test partners here in the United States. Our focus today is going to be on some of the different use cases and how DJI Dock has been deployed. Some of the previous webinars in our Dock series have talked about the capabilities of the dock and some of the key specifications you need to know. So it can certainly look back on our DJI Academy YouTube channel if you're looking to review that information. But really excited today to kind of get to the meat of it today and look up what the different use cases are. So we'll be talking with our panelists about drone as a first responder and then emergency response and avalanche monitoring, two very intriguing topics. And then I'll talk about some of the additional testing we've done on a solar farm with on-demand utility inspections, and then a few additional use cases to keep your mind going. But without further ado, wanted to introduce our panelists today. First off, we have Felix Williams IV. He is a patrol sergeant and works on DFR operations at Pearland Police Department. He's been with that department for over 7 years and has been a patrol supervisor for 2.5. He was recently appointed to the DFR supervisor position, and Pearland PD has received a beyond visual line of sight waiver, which allows them to remotely send drones to calls for service without the need for a visual observer. Pat Dreyer, not only is he an avid backcountry skier and avalanche educator, but he is part of the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities, which he joined in 2016 as an avalanche specialist. He has a Master's of Science in Geospatial Sciences, and his background and expertise is being used to address and resolve challenges utilizing unmanned aircraft systems to improve operational efficiency. He's using innovative technology to solve complex remote emergency response operations, drive informed decisions, and promote safety amongst the department's operations. So two very accomplished panelists, and we're excited to have them on with us today. My name is Grant Hostka. I lead our solutions engineering team in North America. So I want to thank you for taking some time to join us today. Once again, if you weren't with us earlier, we'll be sharing a recording out of the webinar, and you can pose any questions, which we will get to at the end of the presentations today. But without further ado, I'll pass it over to Felix, and he'll be talking about utilizing Dock for drone as a first responder. So go ahead and pass that over to Felix now.
Oh, all the way back.
Man, just wants to jump ahead on you.
I know it. There we go. Hi, like Grant said, I am Felix Williams, patrol sergeant with Pearland. We are a suburb of South Houston. If you see this yellow line right here, that is the Houston city limit. So we butt up right up to Houston. So we're about 49 square miles of coverage and have about 132,000 people in our city with 179 sworn officers. Our daily traffic is a lot higher than our population due to these major thoroughfares that we have coming in and out of Houston. That's just kind of a little bit about our area and our size and what we're working with. So DFR, what is DFR? DFR is drone as first responder. Essentially, we are, to put it bluntly, we are dispatchers in the air. Currently how normal dispatching and calls for service response is, hey, something happens. So somebody picks up the phone, they call 911, they call the police department, they say, hey, this is what's going on, this is where it's at. And then so the person that's taking the call will type in notes in the computer, and then another dispatcher will get on the radio and relay those notes to the officers that are responding. So there's a delay in time between when the person's giving that information and when officers receive that information. And so what DFR aims to do is to cut down on that time and also provide accurate information from a trained operator. Going through here, this is what this slide's talking about, is that's exactly what we're doing. I'll get into the stats here in a little bit, but call comes out, we see it, we send a drone up, go to it, and then we can provide real-time information and also video feed to not only our dispatchers but the responding officers of saying, hey, this is where this is happening exactly, and also what is happening. So we can go ahead and get more resources on the phone if we need them right from the get-go. So moving on, that's just a little bit about DFR. Beyond visual line of sight operations. So we got our COA from the FAA for completely remote beyond visual line of sight operations. So we don't need to have any visual observers with eyes on the drone whatsoever. And that is awesome. It allows us to essentially, I can sit in the drone office, the operations office that we have, and it's about, I think it's about 6 miles away from where our actual drone is. And nobody has to have eyes on the drone due to the technology that we've incorporated with it to fly and do this operation. So a couple of things that are necessary to do that for us is we utilize Iris Automation's Cassia G ground-based air surveillance system. And so on this picture, actually, on top of this water tower is where we have one of those camera systems installed. And what that is, it's an optical-based aircraft detection system that also ties into ADS-B. And so what that looks like is essentially there's a module that has 6 or 8 cameras on it, where when an aircraft is coming in, it'll detect it, and then it will take a picture of it and it will send it to your screen so you can see exactly what the intrusion is on the airspace. Whether it's a bird, whether it's a drone, whether it's the drone that I'm flying, or airplanes or helicopters. And then as it's tied into ADS-B, if it is a manned aircraft, then it will actually give you the registration number of the plane as well, and it will show the tracking path that the aircraft is going on. And that's all about collision mitigation and avoidance. And then on the drone side, we use White Fox, which is a drone detection system. It covers a huge radius. So if we go back to this map of Pearland, the one White Fox system that we have covers the entirety of our city, which is 49 square miles, and then about a third of Houston, and then even further south. So going into our airspace, about half, maybe a little bit more of Pearland is located within William P. Hobby Airport, KHOU's airspace. They are a Class B airspace, and they have a 200-foot ceiling in their airspace. And so that is our ceiling that we have to operate with, even under our COA, due to timings of how fast we can descend and avoid aircraft and all that stuff. All right, so launch sites. Where do we pick them? How do we choose them? What, things with that. So it has to be a secure location with limited access, not just for the purposes of so people don't go in there and mess with the dock or the drone or stuff, but also safety. These drones are large; they can inflict serious injury, and so just as a precaution to people, it has to be in a secure location with limited access. That way, nobody goes out there and they'll be like, "Oh, hey, what's that going on there?" And then they get an M30 running into them or their finger or something. It also has to be monitored in Cassia G airspace. That's the aircraft detection system. It has to be within the bounds of the white box drone detection system, which covers our whole city. And we integrate all of this into DroneSense. Is a third-party company that they do a lot of stuff, live streaming, communication, logs, all sorts of stuff with that. And then you also obviously have to have power and a network connection. So if you look at the picture on this slide, this is actually at one of our fire stations. So it's a controlled access. It's fenced and gated off. And it's kind of just sitting there in an open field where they're not doing stuff around it. They don't have any training in this area or anything, but it's a secure place that we can keep this while we operate. All right. So some use cases. What kind of calls can we send a drone for as a law enforcement agency? Pretty much anything. Anything that's in the public eye that we think, hey, additional information could be useful here. So that's what we're sending on. So some real time or real life cases that we have used the drone for and seen success with. This specific one, we got a call about some suspicious people in a neighborhood. They gave a vehicle description and a location. Well, the drone got there first, got there several minutes before the responding officer was able to provide a real-time accurate location, which was different from what was given to our dispatch. So we were able to give that to the responding officers. We were also able to zoom in, read the tag that was on the vehicle, and then also orbit around to where we can see how many people are in that vehicle and provide that information to the officers. I think on this specific one, it was a minivan, and we were able to swing around and say, hey, there's two people in the front seat, there's one guy in the back seat. That way the officer knows what he's walking into. There's no surprises. And then with the amount of occupants, then we can go ahead and send a second officer just for safety. Another one, we had report of a missing elderly person. So the drone got there 4 minutes before the first officer. And so this one came from, it's like a senior center for Alzheimer's dementia. So very important that if somebody goes missing, we find out where they are, especially with how busy that area is and all the traffic and everything. So we were able to get there 4 minutes before the first officer. And with the drone, we were able to scan a huge area before any of the officers even showed up. And so on this one, she just happened to be sleeping in a different area of the building where she was. But even though we didn't find her with the drone, we still were able to rule out so many different places that she could have been. And that's just as valuable as finding her walking down the road. Another one. So we have we'll go back to Pearland, this major yellow vertical north and south route is State Highway 288. And so with State Highway 288, we have the uh, State Highway 288 proper. We also have the feeder frontage road or service road for 288. And then we also have a new toll road. So we have a lot of crashes, a lot of motorist assist calls out there where it comes in and they say, hey, I'm on 288. I can see, the Bass Pro. Well, that doesn't really narrow it down for us. And on these roads, there's only very specific access points to get on those roads and get to those locations. So when we can send the drone up and we can go over there, find the vehicle and say, hey, they are in this block, they're in the 16200 block of State Highway 288 toll road north. And then that lets the responding officers know exactly where they have to go to access that part of the roadway. So that's been invaluable. Other type of call, ATM alarm at a bank. Drone's able to get there first, say, hey, there's a Brinks truck there. He's working on the ATM. That's what it looks like. Nothing seems out of the ordinary, but that's still something we want to send the officers to go out there and verify. But that's the information they have when they get out there, instead of just, hey, the alarm's going off at the ATM. So the alarm company calls the bank and they don't answer. So they send us out there with no additional information. Some other ones, we had a suspicious person at HEB who was a previous suspect in a theft. The caller was able to provide clothing description and updates until he ended the phone call with our dispatch. And then the drone was able to get there first and follow that person as he was walking away from the location, and then direct the officers to where he was, and they were able to apprehend him and conduct their investigation. A big one for us is backing up officers on traffic stops. So an officer makes a request for backup on a traffic stop, whether or not they're going to they have a reason to conduct a search, whether or not the person has warrants or what have you. We want to have a second officer there for safety purposes. So one of the things we could do is, when the officer makes that request, is send the drone over there, right? Because if, God forbid something happens and the officer's incapacitated in one way or another and unable to provide any information, then the drone's there as a way to provide that information if the officer is no longer able to. Not only that, it's also a deterrent, because since we only have that 200-foot airspace ceiling, the M30 is a big drone. People are going to notice and see the drone. They're going to hear it. They're going to see it. And when they see that, especially when they realize that's part of our operations and what we have, it makes people a little bit less antsy to maybe do something silly that might get them or the officers hurt. Alarm calls, you really wouldn't think alarm. Why would we send a drone to an alarm? Well, a drone can basically do everything an officer can do at an alarm call, except for knock on the door and talk to a person. And so residential alarms, we're able to get there and we can scan the entire house, look for doors and windows that are open or broken or unsecured. Same with business alarms. We can go there and we can hang out. We can say, hey, business looks like it's going on. It's normal. Nobody seems in distress. And then we still send the officers to those locations, but they have that information of what to expect. If we go to a residential alarm and we're sending one officer and I can see with the drone, hey, the back door's open. Well, now we can go ahead and get another officer to en route, so that if need be, we can clear the house and make sure that there's no criminal activity or invaders inside the home. Another thing our department does is security checks. So we can do, say you're going out of town for vacation for a couple of weeks, you can contact the police department and set up a security check And so officers will go by at various hours throughout the day and night and just check on the home, make sure, you know, everything seems in place. House hasn't been broken into or anything with that. And we also do that with businesses, especially like new construction where there's a lot of construction theft. We go in there and I can fly an entire construction scene in a couple minutes and see if anybody's there. And that's a lot quicker than sending an officer out there to walk around on foot or even driving around the property. And I can scan, do a much more thorough and quick scan of the area with the drone. So essentially, we've been pretty successful in what we've been doing so far. You know, crashes, alarms, suspicious persons, in progress crimes, searching for people, security checks, backup, accurate locations, and we're still finding new ways to utilize it. It's every day it seems there's a new call type where I'm like, hey, you know what? Yeah, we could use a drone for that. We could use additional information for that for our responding officers. And we're, you know, like I say, the sky's the limit, literally. We fly the drone and we go out there and do what needs to be done. And luckily, our city council, they are fantastic and work with us and understand our public safety goal. And they actually just approved us to purchase two more docks. So we're going to end up with a total of 3 that we are going to put in our hotspots where we have all of our crimes and crashes to provide additional information in those areas where they are necessary. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have. Oh wait, nope, we got videos. I forgot. So let me swap over here. So this is going to show the operation of the dock and the M30 drone from the dock through Flight Hub. So we'll just go the first one here. All right, so there's no music or anything or voiceovers on here, so I'm going to go ahead and give a little spiel on it. So essentially, what you do is you just you can either create a waypoint from Flight Hub to tell it exactly where you want it to go. You can set the how high you want it to fly on the way there, how high you want it above ground once it arrives there. And then you can also see at the bottom there on signal loss, there's a return to home, there's a continue mission, and then there's, I believe, a hover function. We always wanted to return home. And DJI drones are exceptional at doing that. So from the time you give it the takeoff or waypoint command, it's usually about, on average, we were seeing about 45 seconds. So from the time I say take off, it's in the air about 45 seconds later. And so it will go to its preset altitude, and then it will fly to your waypoint. And so on this one, we're flying to a waypoint down here. So this is not an emergency call we're going to. This was a traffic stop we set up to show how this might look like. And so since it's not an emergency flight, we're limited on flying over moving vehicles and people. And so what we did on this one is we flew through these easements and utility areas behind the homes. And so let's see. All right, and we'll go to the next one. All right, let's show, there we go. All right, and then so it will autonomously fly once you have, when you set a waypoint, it will autonomously fly there. You don't have to do any additional inputs or anything. So From here, we have the next portion of the video. Sorry, I was muted.
Felix.
Yeah. So what I'm doing here is, since this is not an emergency response, I'm flying along this utility area back here behind the homes, and that's what we're doing until we get close enough to actually get eyes on. And so just to when we're flying, especially over residential areas, we keep the camera either at or above horizon level. A lot of people think, hey, big brother, we're not recording what's going on in your backyard. We're flying to a call for service or request for the drone or for backup, and that's what we care about. We don't gimbal down until we arrive on scene. And then so here we are, we're close. And so if you look down at the bottom left of the video screen, you'll see the some controls there for anybody that's navigated with computer, played in computer games. WASD is very intuitive. It's just arrow keys on the keyboard. W to move forward, S to move back, A to strafe left, D to strafe right, Q is to yaw left, and E is to yaw right, C to ascend, Z to descend. And so here we are, we arrived at a traffic stop. We had this set up. So in this instance, this is where, say, an officer checks the person, finds out they have a warrant. Okay, so we're going to want, for safety purposes, a second officer there, but before he attempts to effect that arrest. That way the person feels a lot less confident or brave to try and resist the officer's actions to take them in custody. And so what we're doing here is we're just going to keep eyes on. We're going to keep eyes on the stop until that second officer arrives. And then, just a few of the things here on the screen is you can change from the wide angle camera and the zoom camera. And then on the M30Ts, there's also the infrared or the thermal camera as well. Some buttons down here in the lower left of the video feed. Those are to reset your gimbal. Let's see. There we go. Reset your gimbal. Either completely recenter it or you can keep the vertical angle. There we go. And then we will show this last video here. There we go. All right, and so for RTH, again, since returning to the home is not an emergency, we just fly back the way we came. We know that's a clear avenue corridor that we can fly in, so we just fly back there. And then once we get to a point where we can fly in a safe straight line back, you can hit the RTH button and it will do its thing. It'll fly back to the dock, and as we'll see here, it will automatically land itself, center itself, and begin charging for the next flight. So it'll go over the dock, it will pitch straight down. And then, as you can see here, there's a camera on the dock itself attached to the wind meter that will show you the operations as it comes down. And so just some notes while we're waiting for it to land. So during waypoint flights, you have a speed of about 34 miles an hour, which is the normal mode flight speed for the M30. But when you're doing manual flight controls, you're limited to about 5 meters per second. That's a safety thing, so you don't run into stuff or crash your drone. And so once the drone lands, these push rods will center it. The front and rear push rods will center the drone, and then the side rods, which actually charge the drone, they will center it horizontally. And once it's completely centered, there's a little prong that comes out that sticks in the drone's legs that charges the batteries on the drone. So these batteries do quick charge. In our testing, we found around one for every minute of flight time to get it back to fully charged. You need about a minute and a half of charge time. It can go from, I believe, 10% charge to 90% in 20-25 minutes. We really haven't had any issues with downtime due to charging. So let me, all right, bring this back up. Okay, so some takeaways. I personally have conducted DFR operations for about 105 hours. That's sitting in the office, waiting for a call to come out, sending the drone to it, providing updates, and everything like that. So I have a pretty good handle on the capabilities and of the system and the things that we're integrating into it. And so these are just some key takeaways that we've gone over. You can fly completely through Flight Hub 2. We're going to fly through DroneSense. It's very similar. It's just a different system because we already have other things integrated into DroneSense. So that's how we're going to fly them. Let's see here. We just need the one person in the office. It is still one pilot per drone. So say when we have our 3 drones, when we have our 3 drones and docks in operation, I can't send, all 3 drones out to calls at the same time. It's still one operator, one drone in the air. Let's see. Again, standby status to taking off, drone in the air, about 45 seconds on average. Sometimes it'll be around 40, sometimes it may take a little bit longer. It just depends on how long it takes the drone to acquire the RTK signal and pick up the satellites. Now, in those 105 hours of operations, the data shows that both our mean and our median response time is 3 minutes, which is, if you have looked into any agency's response times for any sort of calls, that is outstanding. And the beauty of it is it doesn't matter what kind of call type it is. So something you would consider, a high priority call, say, a T-bone crash or something where there's a high likelihood of somebody being injured, our response time is going to be about 3 minutes. As where you have something that's not as high priority, say, a residential alarm where, you can look at the call history and, hey, they've had 10 false alarms this, past week and a half. Well, the drone's going to be there in 3 minutes. So it's the same response time that doesn't change based on the call type. We're able to respond and provide that information to the officers and dispatch so we can allocate resources and have a bit better picture of what to expect once we get there. So our next steps, I kind of touched on this earlier. So we partnered up with Adorama Business Solutions, and they have given us our current dock that's in operation to use and demonstrate and test out for a bit. And we thank them for that because they're not yet commercially available, but that's coming. Like I said, our awesome city council, they just approved us about a week ago to purchase 2 additional ones. And so we're going to have 3 of those in our hotspots, sending them to all sorts of calls all the time. We already have those planned out. Like I said, we have two great crime analysts, and we know exactly where these are going and where they're needed, and that's where we're going to put them. And so being able to test the dock, we previously had DJI themselves gave us a dock to test out, and that's the one we had most of our data from. We had it for the longest. It was in operation, and there were just so many things that we're able to work with DJI, whether it's usability, UI, features, issues that should be addressed. They're very receptive and working on getting all that taken care of. So no matter what your application of using this system is, that it's going to be user friendly and safe for everybody to use, especially since these are all going to be mostly used for beyond visual line of sight operations. That's paramount, is the safety that we have when we're operating these large drones. Uh, but yeah, that's all I have. So I will turn it back over to Grant and Pat.
Thanks, that's very interesting as always, and appreciate you sharing some of the lessons learned and information there. So we'll cycle back to some of these questions at the end, but at this point, we'll turn it over to Pat to go ahead and talk a bit about operations in Alaska.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, as Grant said, I'm Pat Dreyer. I work for the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities in Juneau, Alaska, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we're using the DJI dock for here in Alaska. So specifically, I am managing the avalanche program for Southeast Alaska, and I'll get to show here what we're doing. The state of Alaska is a large state. The Department of Transportation and Public Facilities oversees over 200 airports, multiple ferries, many miles of marine highway miles, as well as lane highway miles throughout the state. We also have numerous public facilities. So there's a lot of different opportunities to use this technology, and I'm just going to showcase one application here with the avalanche program. I'm down in Southeast Alaska in Juneau, and in Juneau we have steep mountainous terrain, heavy snowfall, an environment where avalanches are very common in the wintertime. Juneau has a history of avalanches reaching urban areas as well as infrastructure. Photo on the left is from the 1960s when some homes were impacted from an avalanche that is over some of our urban areas. We also had instances over the years where our utility infrastructure was damaged from avalanches as well. So managing these networks is challenging, and we're looking at ways to help manage this using the technology that's currently available. So here at DOT, our avalanche programs run statewide, where we have hundreds of avalanche paths that we're monitoring throughout the winter that directly affect highway and road alignments. Currently, we run what we call active mitigation programs. So we're using either military artillery, explosives, or other devices to intentionally trigger avalanches during times where they're more easily done in a controlled environment during road closures or storm events when we have to close the roads. We're looking to utilize all types of airborne remote sensing to help make informed decisions, better understand the snow distribution, which will allow us to better utilize resources and eventually to cost savings. Specifically for this project, we're looking at snow distribution mapping in our avalanche start zones to really allow us to make informed decisions about avalanche hazards and potentially reduce costs during our avalanche hazard reduction. So I'm going to show you a video here of one of our intentionally triggered avalanches. This is during a time where the road is closed, so you can see a small explosion in the upper start zones, and this is done again during time the road is closed, so we know that there are nobody in the area that we're controlling. And there are no audio files associated with these videos. So you can see the avalanche comes down the mountain, it's just reaching the roadway area now, which is along the sea level. And the avalanche is often run through our transportation networks, utility networks, and down into the ocean. This is something that we do during closures and everything else to prevent this happen naturally when the roadway is open. We partnered with Frontier Precision and DJI here in the last year to test the capabilities of the DJI dock to help us with our managing these areas. And we're really excited about the technology and all the other applications that we can use this for. So thanks to our partners for allowing us to do this test case. You know, we've heard a lot about this already, but really the applications for us, the ability to remotely operate 24/7, day or night, rain or shine. The weather here in Alaska changes quickly and often a lot of darkness in the wintertime. So having an aircraft that's capable of operating in all those conditions is truly something that's very important to us. I'll show you some screenshots here of the way we're managing our Flight Hub 2 and really our avalanche program here in Southeast. So our dock is positioned near one of our avalanche starts or run out zones that you saw the video of. You can see in the image here on the right, all of the known avalanche paths along that corridor. And then as we're starting to collect imagery and information, how we're able to use that in real time. So when we're flying, you know, for us, we have terrain concerns for flying the aircraft. So we're going from elevation of sea level, so 0, up to ridgetop is about 3,600 feet or just over 1,000 meters. So we're able to launch the drone remotely, go up, take photos of any hazards if in the snow that we're able to see, or document avalanche activity to help make those informed decisions. We're using this as a mapping application, so I'll get into how we're doing that, but we're using this to document after weather events such as snowfall or wind events. We can document how much snow has been transported or deposited into our start zones to have an idea of how big an avalanche could potentially be and what we need to do to potentially reduce those hazards. One of our project milestones here happened a few months ago where we were able to launch the drone remotely, and we did have a pilot on scene for this operation, but we were able to fly just over ridgetop, so up to 3,600 feet. It took about 3.5, 4 minutes for us to climb to that elevation, take a few photos, and then descend back down. So we're really excited about that. And I'll get into our waivers and everything else here near the end of the presentation. So again, you know, there's multiple applications for this. We're using it for emergency response, and I'll get into that in a minute, but also inspection of areas, documentation of avalanches, and using this to really make a robust observation network within our zone. As far as mission planning is concerned, we have some unique challenges operating in the mountains. So we have rapidly changing terrain, flight time concerns as far as battery life, and conflicting air traffic in the area as well. So with our partners at Frontier Precision and DJI, we're able to use some different software packages to do flight planning, both UGCS and Flight Hub 2, to optimize our flights within our corridors to do mapping segments. Each area of interest, or each avalanche path for that matter, was split into different segments to optimize flight time and terrain following. So we could do overflights of the entire area in a single flight, but to collect the imagery that we're looking for, the resolution that we're looking for, we're splitting it into multiple sections to optimize our operations. And also the weather could often limit our operations to the lower run out areas where clouds often obscure our upper start zones. So during our initial testing, we've captured some high resolution aerial imagery of areas that often are known for frequent avalanches, which we're using in our day-to-day operations. The cameras are providing excellent imagery for us for our program here. You saw in some of the other videos the capabilities of the zoom camera, but we're able to launch into some of these environments and look into the next avalanche path or region-wide on what activity is going on. So right now we're collecting data for our use for plan for this winter. So we're getting bare earth models and other reference information without snow cover here in the summer, where we can use that for our differencing for our models once we have snow start to accumulate in our start zones. Kind of example of our workflows. This is something we're using internally right now, how we're capturing imagery with the dock or other platforms. We're then uploading it to the cloud using different applications for processing that data. Right now we're using SiteScan and then hosting it in our Esri environments to then share amongst users. We're also using this for, I was telling you about emergency response a little bit. So it was touched in the last presentation, but if we do have an avalanche that reaches the roadway or a natural avalanche that occurs, we can immediately launch the dock for rapid response to scan the roadway for any vehicles, any persons, or anything that is damaged to infrastructure. With our steep mountainous terrain, our corridors are pretty confined, and we usually have utility corridors. So Juneau's powered by hydropower south of town, and those transmission lines are co-located with our transportation networks. So we have multiple opportunities to use this technology to do inspections of both transportation and utility corridors. And we did do that during some of our initial testing. We've been able to program missions that benefit both the utility company and DOT. Another opportunity that just recently came up here last month, in the northern part of our state, we had flooding that was occurring along the Dalton Highway, which is used to transport oil and gas and other mining and resource activities in the region. We were trying to set up a quick response, emergency response to mitigate the hazards of the flooding and have the highway remain open. So we packed up the dock from Juneau and shipped it to Dead Horse, Alaska. And here is a video of what we're doing, and then I'll get into the details of that response. Again, there's no sound with this. So the dock was really a key part in this response. For those that are unfamiliar with the state of Alaska, Dead Horse, Alaska is up in the Arctic, on the Arctic Ocean. It is about 1,000 miles from Juneau. We transported the dock, we packed it up from our Thane location there down in Juneau, packed it up and shipped it to Dead Horse via air cargo. It took a few days to get there with some delays due to weather and availability on a flight, but we were able to get it there fairly quickly. We used a large generator that's usually used for construction to power the dock 24/7. We're using Starlink internet at all of our dock locations currently, and that's enabled us to have connectivity anywhere in the state. Since this was a temporary deployment, we were just going to have it here during the initial response and flooding. We just shipped it on the shipping pallet and put that on firm ground and installed, you can see in the photo on the bottom, Starlink, as well as a security camera to monitor operations since this was going to be left out in the open. I can talk a little bit about our beyond visual line of sight operations. Here, we're a little different here in Alaska. We're operating under both Part 107 and Part 91 with different COAs. So we have both tactical beyond visual line of sight, and when we're doing emergency response for geohazards and other emergency events, we're able to request temporary flight restrictions with the FAA, so we're able to close the airspace. However, that's not always ideal, so we're working with the FAA to figure out what the best course of action is for these type of environments. This is a work in progress, and it requires close coordination with all the entities, our State Emergency Response Center, the FAA, Anchorage Flight Center, and local flight services for all operations. During this Dalton Highway response, we had a site that we were monitoring continuously. So we'd fly morning and evening each day to collect imagery so that decision makers, construction project managers, and leadership could be informed in real time of what the current status of the highway was. We did several site tour flights. So we had meetings where we're live streaming the imagery from the drone to stakeholders or other managers to make decisions about what would be done the next day or what had been completed during the day, the progress on the repair. We typically would go out and fly. It'd take a few hours to upload the imagery to the cloud. We would then process it and share it amongst the user groups. And here's an example of imagery that were captured. So this is using Esri site scan to look at changes from either start to the project or end of the project. Here, the video that's playing now, or day-to-day changes, which I'll play in this other video here, as we're monitoring changes from morning to evening or day-to-day for that matter. So this was well received within our management to be able to show this information in real time, make measurements from volumes of material that was either being hauled or trucked to the site, as well as changes in river morphology from day to day. So where do we go from here? We're going to continue working through our construction programs and our avalanche programs to optimize what we're using these docks for. We've put in several other research grants to fund more of these docks. We have thought of a lot of different test cases for this use, and we're just excited to explore what's next. And again, Grant will take questions, but that's all I have for you. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Pat. That was awesome. Very cool to see the dock in action and how you all have kind of furthered that on. So like Pat mentioned, we'll take some questions at the end. I did want to cover a few additional use cases that we have been testing for those kind of looking to get a full view of some of the use cases for the dock itself. So go ahead and get that going here on my end. Alrighty. Go. Oh, sorry. Cool. Seeing the screen here on my end, but just talking through a few different use cases, starting with inspecting a solar farm. So this was a 181 megawatt solar farm that we worked with UVT and Raptor Maps, a solar software provider, to go out and run a proof of concept here for the dock on site with the provider. So deployment side, one of the things you're thinking about for deployment is always going to be the location where you're going to be operating your flights from, and then also think about the infrastructure. So the Connex building on site was good because it provided, an elevated position for the dock, a clear line of sight for satellite reception, and then easy access to power and internet. You can see transportation of the dock is a consideration as well. It's about 220 pounds. So depending on where it's being placed, having proper infrastructure or people in place to help with that. On the mission planning side, we're able to do that with the Raptor map side, and they have specific data collection standards where the drone can go back and forth over the rows with a specific gimbal pitch. So we're able to define those flight routes and then bring them into Flight Hub 2. When you're thinking about data capture, obviously battery is an important consideration. So you have the option to run it at 90% or do additional charge with a scheduled mission. But we found for an inverter block, the average capture time was about 5 minutes per megawatt. And then we also tested the ability to fly essentially round trip here to a block and back. So it was about 5 kilometers round trip or 2.5 kilometers out to the end of the solar farm. So you can see where perhaps placing the dock in the center of the field could make more sense, but we're able to show the ability to cover those further blocks at the distance here. Data offload, we are able to push that through Starlink or a different internet provider through wired Ethernet that's connected to the dock. And one of the nice things is you don't have to upload the imagery before you can complete your next mission. You can complete the data capture during times of good irradiance and then upload after the fact. So in this case, we're able to capture, upload to Flight Hub 2, and then have Raptor Maps ingest that data for analysis. And you can see one of the issues found here in the IR photo on the right, which you can validate with the visual photo on the left in regards to ruling out different issues. Some of the supplemental inspections, we talked about that, but you have the ability to create 3D models or point clouds on site and deploy the dock for additional monitoring. And on the solar farm, kind of thinking about stacking use cases here, whether that's construction progress monitoring, security patrols, vegetation assessment, or looking at fencing and different infrastructure there. So summarizing the project overall, the key takeaway here is we're able to collect data with the dock at a rate of about 5 megawatts per hour, topping off at about 7 megawatts an hour for operations when following the Raptor standard guidelines. And then about 6 hours a day of flight time is your maximum with irradiance. So it leads to the whole farm being able to be captured in approximately 6 working days. So obviously on site, they do complete biannual or annual standard inspections, which do vary in price. So having a beyond visual line of sight waiver for that would allow some good cost savings for the organization. And what we did see though is that the dock provides a hub for data offload, charging, mission planning that can all be completed off site, and a pilot on site with an RC can also monitor operations to further optimize drone operations. They also estimate labor costs and is an estimated $12,000 annually for ancillary data capture by on-site pilots and supporting staff, in addition to the annual inspections. On-demand utility inspections is another item that we've done some testing on with UBT and Ozarks Electrical Cooperative. They are an electrical co-op providing service to more than 70,000 members, and the purpose of utilizing drone technology for them is to more quickly and effectively assess damage and restore power. So you guys know about the dock and the drone itself, but once again, in the traditional workflow, a pilot will drive out to the site, charge batteries, launch the drone, and then fly an inspection of the substation or power lines going out of there, land the drone and take that data back to the office, with the dock side able to do that remotely. So one of the interesting things here with Flight Hub is you can create a point cloud or 3D model and bring it in. You can then fly through that 3D model or point cloud using your keyboard and plan specific photos to be captured. And then from there, the drone will execute and you can see the exact photo being captured that was planned in the model itself, and then the ability to review that after the fact or download it. Some of the additional use cases, just wanted to touch on briefly for you all. We've covered site security with the ability for the dock to run a repeated mission and also take live flight controls at any time. We've also been doing some testing with gas detection for the Sniffer 4D Mini 2. You can configure the Sniffer for different gases, whether that's an oil and gas, hazmat, or ambient air monitoring. And then the Sniffer 4D device has built-in cellular connectivity for real-time data that's pushed back to the Sniffer 4D mapper software. So this is something that's currently under testing, but you can see that there is a spot in the dock for a payload to go on top. And we'll also be working on additional support for the payload SDK through Flight Hub 2 and the dock itself. Here are some of the different deliverables you can see at the end of the day with the grid, ISO line, and 3D map. So doing some testing on the mining space. You can see a video right here of blast planning. Safety is obviously paramount in the mining space and part of the culture there. So being able to deploy the drone, whether it's for high wall or repeated inspections, and then also monitoring blasts, is certainly a plus. You can certainly do a general mapping with the drone itself, but it's important to consider what the accuracy requirements are. It's important to remember with the M30, we have a 1/2 inch sensor that does have a rolling shutter. So depending on the accuracy requirements at the end of the day, it kind of depends on if mapping is a use case for that. With the dock, we also have what's called our Cloud API, which allows third-party integrators to interface with both our drones through the Pilot 2 app and then directly with the dock. So one of the pluses here is we've seen some early developments and positive solutions from companies such as FlightNow, Drone Harmony, and AirHub. And some of the unique capabilities of these platforms include the ability to run artificial intelligence on the drone feed for detection or local deployment for those who want to deploy the dock on a local network, along with the ability to customize solutions specifically for different use cases. So that was it from my side there. I just wanted to quickly cover some of the different use cases that we have been exploring as well, in addition to the detailed information that Pat and Felix had shared today. But at this point, we'll go ahead and take questions and have Pat and Felix rejoin me here. All righty. So let's get into some questions here. And I think you may have covered this a bit, Pat, but talking about collaboration with other agencies or other people within your agency, was there any sharing of 3D models? Is that also possible through the Esri platform?
Yes, absolutely. I didn't share that aspect during the presentation, but we are sharing those models as well, the same as we're sharing our 2D models.
Awesome. And then I guess it could be both of you. Felix, you've probably gone a bit further on the range side, but do you have any experience there with the dock on what you're seeing range-wise or how that's gone through your testing?
Yeah, so for us, where our dock is currently set up, we are obstructed on 3 of the cardinal directions. And so we generally have about a 4,000 foot range in those. But like I said, there's large metal buildings directly between the dock and those directions. But and going west from where it's set up, there's no obstructions, and we can easily fly to the extent of what our Cassia G covers, which is about 1.15 statute miles from the dock.
Got it. Anything additional on your end for that, Pat, in regards to range?
I just add that our range is more limited by terrain with the mountains and everything else, so we haven't flown to those type of distances yet.
Makes sense. Meteorological wise, what I guess meteorological conditions have you guys encountered thus far, and what's been, I guess, what have you seen with the dock there? We'll start with Pat on that one.
Yeah, so Juneau's a maritime climate. We have heavy rainfall, heavy snowfall, and wind and everything else. So far we're able to operate in all conditions that we've encountered. We did have a couple instances in Dead Horse where our flight controls, there was warnings on takeoff and wind speeds that were observed in the area, forecasted for the area. Well, we have been operating though. We've been able to operate throughout conditions that are present in Alaska, which is really impressive to us to see that the aircraft is capable to operate in 35, 40 knot winds. We've flown the aircraft in and had no issues. We've also done mapping missions in rainfall, heavy rainfall for us, inches per day of rain. So we have the aircraft is lived up to its expectations thus far.
Got it. And then Felix, on your end, I guess maybe not as much snow thus far in the Houston area, but maybe a bit more heat.
Yeah, so we're like I said, we're just south of Houston, so it's always hot and it's always humid, which being right by the Gulf, it means it's also salty. Um, so we haven't had any issues because our humidity's always in the 80, 90%. I mean, there's days where we'll go, and when we do our pre-flight inspection of the dock and the drone, we'll see that well, hey, there's condensation in there, but that's because it's 80 degrees all night and the humidity's in 90%, but it still runs just fine. And being in the Gulf, we also have pretty consistent winds. Not always too extreme, but it's usually at least always 10-mile-an-hour winds. And I've flown in some light rain and also some pretty windy conditions. I think probably the windiest I've gotten up to was upper 20s, gusting low 30s. Haven't had any problems with it. But the big thing is it's been handling the heat well so far. Like I said, it's been 100+ heat index down here for at least 2 weeks. Haven't had any issues. I don't know if it's been mentioned, but in case anybody didn't know, the docks have HVAC systems inside of them to where they will cool or heat based on your needs. And so the internal AC works well enough for where we have it. It's in direct sunlight. And I don't think I've only seen the batteries go over I think 42 degrees Celsius once, and that's when we were just doing training flights and we were hovering for a long period of time, so we weren't really getting any air or wind on those batteries, and once we land and it gets in the box and it cools it down, then it's ready to go.
Cool. Good to know. Good to know. Couple quick ones I'll take on my end. Is there any other DJI drones compatible with the dock? It is only the M30 dock version that is compatible with the dock itself. You have the optional thermal camera for the M30 series, your optical zoom camera, laser rangefinder, and then the wide camera there. And then on the solar farm inspection for detecting the problems, that imagery, thermal and visual, was taken in by Raptor Maps, and they complete analysis on that and then tie the data to a digital twin. So you can see the severity and where any issues are at for the solar farm. Next one here, when you set up the dock, you have kind of your dock point, and then you have a backup landing point. Has there been any situations where the backup landing point has been used for you all?
No, we haven't had any issues where either for wind reasons or what have you, we haven't had it to where it wouldn't land and decided to go to the alternate landing site yet.
That's the same for us. We have not had that occur yet.
All right. Good here there. And then first up, when setting up the dock, there is an RTK, station built into the landing pad of the dock. How did you guys kind of configure the dock and set it up in the different locations? And we'll start with Pat on that one.
Yeah, this is interesting. So we've set it up at multiple locations now. Here in Juneau, we have a RTK network that we're installing directly adjacent to the dock to use a differential correction as well as the internal units. You could use either of those. When we transport this up to the Dalton Highway, we did use the internal RTK to set up operations. So we've used both applications, and I can't say that either one of them seemed to be more accurate than the others. Both operated efficiently and had no issues with flights, takeoff and landings, and other operations.
So for us, we actually the dock we have now, we're having some issues with getting the RTK set up. The satellite positioning and coordinates has done well enough, and so we're still checking on our end because we have a statewide RTK network that we have access to and we implement for other stuff, like we use Trimble for crash reconstruction and stuff, which is RTK. And so we just haven't quite figured it out for this dock, but we did have it on the DJI dock that we had, and we didn't have any issues with that one.
Got it. Okay. Yep, good to hear on that side. But I think that wraps up questions from attendees. So big thank you to both Pat and Felix for taking the time to prepare and share the presentations. I know they're both very busy, so really appreciate you guys taking the time to test this technology and then kind of share lessons learned and information with everyone here. So recording will be sent out to everyone, and hope you all have a great Tuesday.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.